Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we've got draft talk for you. On Monday, the NFL Scouting Combine officially begins in Indianapolis. We've got some prospect talk and overall philosophy talk about how to use the Combine in the draft process. All that and more on this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Friday edition of the show. I'm Louis DiBiase alongside my co-host, Gino Camilleri. You can find the show Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Gino, as I mentioned, we've got draft talk today, man. It's crazy. The Super Bowl just happened, but the Combine's on Monday.
It's unbelievable that they're going to start showing up. We're going to start hearing who interviews with each team, and we're going to see some world-class athletes. Because I just want to start out by saying that when you watch Olympic sprinters, right, these guys are training 4 years to wipe off milliseconds of time. Right. Give these guys some slack if they don't perform up to your expectations. It is just a piece of the puzzle. It is just one day. These guys don't perform 40s during the regular season more than a couple times. It's not something that you train for until you get into this part of your career, but it's going to be fun, man. There's been some memorable ones, especially some great Eagles over the last couple of years who have just tested out of the moon.
I mean, Jordan Davis literally last year.
Unicorn.
Right? I mean,
yeah, absolute unicorn, running a 4.68 40 at 360
Still
pounds.
Can't believe he did that. Insane. Unbelievable.
It's insane. Yeah. And that's one of those things that scouts go in there and they say, okay, where can we find the margins? This is all about margins. You're going to see times that are closer. You're going to say, oh, what's the difference between a 1.61 10-yard split and a 1.63 10-yard split? To NFL scouts, this is huge. This is just another part of the overall scouting circle and part of that calendar. It's a 365 a day a year calendar. There's all these events. Pro days will come after the Combine, but this is one of the most important. 300 guys are going to be there in front of all the scouts, GMs, coaches, and it is one of the places where teams find out, hey, we're going to invest future first-round picks in these guys, and we're not going to invest future picks in these guys because it might not even happen on the field what went wrong. It might happen in a meeting room, and that's exactly what the Combine is.
I agree. I think the Combine, you got to look at it this way. We said this on the show last year. It's a part of the puzzle. You don't want to put so much stock into it like a Cincinnati Bengals did when John Ross breaks the 40-yard dash time and he ends up going in the first round when clearly he is not a first-round player. You don't want to put all your eggs in this basket. It's just part of the process, just like the pro days, just like the Senior Bowl, the CGS All-Star Game, the East-West Shrine Game. You look at just the entire tape. I mean, that's what truly matters, and I think we've learned that over time more than anything, that the tape is what matters. I forget who said it in Alabama at the Senior Bowl a couple years ago, but I really took away from the how to evaluate these processes is really that it's a tool to help you confirm things you saw on tape or raise questions that you then go back and answer through the tape. You know what I mean? So the Combine is never something that you say, oh, wow, this guy does this. Now we know that, let's go draft him, or he doesn't do this well because of what you saw at the Combine. As you mentioned, even a 40-yard dash time, the 40 is a lot different than play speed, right? So these guys never really run 40-yard dashes. You could, the way you explode up, there's, certain things that affect your time. Just if you were sore that morning, right? It's an off season where you're not practicing every single day. So there's things about the Combine that, again, are very valuable, and they can raise questions if a player tests really well or doesn't. And it can have you go back, like Tariq Woolen, I thought, at the Senior Bowl and the Combine last year, put himself on the map. So it can help in a positive and negative way, but it should never be the end-all be-all.
No, absolutely not. And I think back and I look at one guy, Tease Tabor. This is probably 2017.
The Florida corner, right?
Yes, Florida corner.
Yeah, geez,
that was a year that the Eagles really need. No, there's a reason I brought this name up, because at all offseason he was first round in multiple mock drafts. First round. You see the tape and it's like, okay, I can see it. I can see why there's that first round hype. Then he runs like a 4.78 40 as a cornerback, and you go back and you're like, okay, the long speed maybe doesn't match what we saw. And
Right.
you've seen how successful he's been, and that's why his name hasn't been talked about a lot. But I forget who it is exactly. I think it's Charlie Casserly, and he's always there. He's always got he's always at the combine. He's got his stopwatch, the old school with the one eye. Yep, that's Charlie Casserly. He says that these events, if they do well, it should be a plus, but it's like the SATs where a wrong question doesn't hurt against you, right? Because ultimately, like you said, you go back to the tape. I think you look at Orlando Brown, who the Eagles just lost to in the Super Bowl, had one of the all-time worst combine performances ever. I think he had a 16-inch vertical, and the guy just goes and wins a Super Bowl and is a high-quality player, and this tape showed exactly that as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think you just got to use the combine responsibly if you're an NFL team. And, Gino, I think I didn't put as much stock into this over the years as I do now, and Jalen Hurts is a huge reason for that, but the interview process maybe means more than anything. Putting those guys on the whiteboard, talking to teams about, their past and, the schematics of what they did in college and how they'll translate to the NFL. Not that I said that didn't matter before, but, I've always been into the physical traits and the upside for prospects. But I think you look at Jalen Hurts and, what he does so well and what he did at the time was show his incredible maturity and leadership and confidence in those interviews. I think that really sold the Eagles. Like, this is what a quarterback's makeup should be mentally. And that part of it is way more important than I think I've personally talked about in this show. I know you've highlighted it more, but the more we've seen Jalen Hurts come through Philadelphia, I think that's been raised more for sure.
I have the luxury of being pretty tapped in at CGS. I'm one of the area scouts, right? And one of the cool things that we get to do is they have unlimited interview time for about 2 days. And all we do is we run prospects back and forth to these teams. But during that time, you can overhear what these guys are talking about. And they're just trying to find out the makeup, who they are as a person. But ultimately, if it turns out that you're not a person that they want to work with because either you have questionable work ethic, you have questionable things that happened in the past, they're going to be found out at that time, at the interview process. And this isn't the first time that they've talked to a lot of these guys. This is just an ongoing thing that is just more hands in the pot, and you get to figure it out. But it can ultimately get you a job. I think back a couple of years ago in the COVID year, there was a wide receiver out of the University of Central Florida. His name was Jacob Harris. He ends up getting drafted by the Los Angeles Rams. He's been in the league. He hasn't seen too much playing time, but I remember just overhearing him in an interview, and you're just listening to this kid say how much he's overcome and how like he took his last chance to go to UCF and like these different things that are like, yeah, you want to bet on this guy, and you'll never see that on the football field when it comes to the tape. And a lot of that comes down to what the feeling is when they talk to these guys. And it might sound crazy, but you get that gut reactionary feeling. I go back to when Carson Wentz was drafted. You watch that video that is put out. It's circulated about every year this time during the combine. When Carson's on the board, they're breaking down tape, and you just see the reaction of Doug and Howie when he leaves the room that like, oh, this kid actually gets it, and he understands what it takes to play at that next level. So this is just another thing. It's just another tool that you're trying to figure out.
It's the best way to use it. Tool.
Exactly. It's a tool. It's not going to be something that builds the house, but it's going to be a nail that you have to nail in some beams to keep that house up, because you have to find out, is this guy a great person as well as a great football player?
We're going to talk about some of those football players that are going to be showcased throughout the week next week in Indianapolis for the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine. Coming up next, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar. This is 6 seasons that we've been doing this here at LOE with Lou and myself, and I've eaten more Built Bars than I could even count at this point in time. They've been riding with us since the beginning, and there's a reason that we stick side by side with them. They're not just delicious, they're nutritious as well. I'm getting ready for my wedding. I started going back to the gym. I don't like to eat in the morning, but I like to work out in the morning. So I just grab a Built Bar on the go. It's 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and it gives me 17 grams of protein on the go. And the good thing is I don't even have to wait to get it delivered from Built.com anymore. I just go to the Walmart down the street where I can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate or coconut puffs, or the Sam's Club, which is right next door to Walmart for me. I grab the 13-bar box with the brownie batter and the churro Man, those two are great. I like to split those in half, put them together, get a brownie batter churro mix. Oh, you won't regret it. Go to Built.com today, Sam's Club or Walmart to pick up your favorite flavor of Built Bar. And you know Locked On. We're always eating them here.
All right, everybody, it's a Friday edition of Locked On Eagles, wrapping up the week before the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine on Monday officially begins. And, Gino, when you look at who is going to be in Indianapolis, there are some really good prospects. And the Eagles, they have 2 first-round picks this year, number 10 and 30, right? Because Miami doesn't have a pick at 32. So the Eagles have a pick higher in the first round this year towards the back end of day one. And I think there's a lot of prospects that we're going to be watching, I think more so on the defensive side of the football than the offensive side, but they need offensive line help, I think, immediately and long-term. So are there any specific prospects at the top for the first round? Because the thing about Philadelphia this year, you know, we'll see what happens with comp picks, but right now they have their 2 first-round picks, their second-round pick, and a third, and after that, they don't have a pick until the 7th round, at least as of now. So I'm thinking more right now about the top prospects.
I think this is one of those drafts where if you look back to 2018, the Jordan Mailata, the Josh Sweat, where it's quality over quantity. I mean,
got to nail them.
Have to hit. You know that next year you're going to have countless picks. It's going to be an obscene amount that they have with the comp picks that are coming in as well. I could see them Lou, if let's say a lot of those defensive players start to drop because 4 quarterbacks go in the top 10 and you want to move back 3-4 spots like they've done so many times in the high teens. You look at the Devontae Smith draft where they move up from 11 to 10 or 12 to 10, I believe it was. And they move down or move up to get Jordan Davis. They move down plenty of times. They just are able and willing to move in that area to get more draft picks, whether it's a third or a fourth to move down. I think they do that. I think they'll walk away with 7 or 8 at the end of the day. Howie Roseman, he wants at least 7. And I think at the top, you have to be looking corner. You have to be looking offensive line. I know that you're going to watch Bijan Robinson run as a running back. You're going to be like, oh my God, this guy's
don't give in to it.
Don't give in. Don't give in. That's exactly what the message should be. Look at those guys that are in the consideration for the top 10 picks. I think of like the Christian Gonzalez's of the world, the Devon Witherspoons. I don't think they go offensive line that early unless one of those big. I mean, if
I was gonna say, I don't think there's a guy worth that pick. You know what I mean? You're not taking a guard with a top 10 pick. I think it's the corners. You know, you mentioned Gonzalez, your boy from Oregon, Devon Witherspoon. I think Joey Porter Jr. too. If you want to move down from that 10th pick or maybe move up from that second first round selection, Joey Porter, who's going to be a fan favorite because he went to Penn State. Kelly Ringo, you've got a second round pick and a late day 1 selection. So if you want to go offensive line earlier, you have Kelly Ringo. There are a lot of corners. This draft class overall, I think, is weaker, but for what the Eagles need specifically with offensive and defensive line help and corner, it's a good class for those needs.
Oh, without a doubt. And I go back to that class when it was like Jeffrey Simmons and the Eagles made out with Andre Dillard, I believe. And you're sitting there and you're saying, how is there going to be a scenario where these guys fall that the Eagles could get one? And ultimately it didn't work out in their favor. But now that 10th pick could be a saving grace, because if you're wanting to get a cornerback and you have only the 30th pick, and let's say you still have 6 picks, you're going to give up what? 33% of your picks to go up and get your guy. That's such a saving grace to be there at 10, because not only can you wait for one of those corners, you can wait and see if those defensive linemen fall. If you love Brian Brisset out of Clemson, he could be that guy, or Miles Murphy, if he is one of those individuals. But I think the Eagles at 10 is such a great position because you're still close enough to the top 10 to where one of those quarterbacks could fall. A team wants to get up there, rate at 10, let's say, to draft Will Levis. You could get a heck of a haul there. You can move back and still wait for the top defensive guy to come out. Or if that guy is there and you want to move up just 1 or 2 selections to make sure you get the J.C. Horn and the Pat Surtain, which you missed out on the last time, you also have that plausibility as well. So optionality, like Howie Roseman has been saying since last year when he acquired that pick, is everything that 10 is going to give you going into this year.
I wonder if he's going to try to do it again where he collects a first-round pick in next year's class and hopes that a team like, let's say, Washington or, one of those teams that's in quarterback purgatory, even let's say a Minnesota, or I don't know, a team like that that's looking for a quarterback.
Orleans, yeah.
Yeah, New Orleans, right? Can you imagine if they did it again? They trade up for one of those quarterbacks. You can collect a future first round pick. You move down in this draft. But yeah, again, like you mentioned, maybe you lose out on the top few corners. But Daniel Jeremiah, I was looking at his top 50 draft prospects throughout at every position. It was 1 through 50 with all positions available. And he had like 7 or 8 corners on his list. And he mentioned specifically, this is not a great class overall from top to bottom, but at cornerback, pick your poison, the style you want, top heavy, it's deep. And so I think you could justify moving down, or no matter what you do, I think you can get a good corner and then get one of those linemen of the future on either side of the ball. I think we both like Osiris Torrance a lot, the Florida guard. Look at Steve Avila from TCU. He's another guard. Cody Mock from North Dakota State. You could try to pick a tackle for the long term outside of Lane Johnson when he eventually retires. So there's a lot of options right now, Gino, and even edge. I mean, you mentioned a few guys like Miles Murphy. I like Kean White from Georgia Tech. Thought he was impressive at the Senior Bowl. I don't think Tyree Wilson will fall, but it's an awesome luxury to have 3 picks in the first 2 rounds right now with a roster that's already completely loaded with talent.
This seems like one of those drafts too, where you're saying, are you going to make that 10th pick? And let's say they go corner because you need a corner. Or is the class that good? And I think you can make that argument with defensive line and with cornerback in the top 10 pick. When you go down to 30, I think that's prime territory to maybe make an Osiris Torrance pick, maybe pick the top guard, somebody who is going to make that effect, not this year maybe, or maybe this year, but it isn't at a position where it might be heavier in the top, where defensive line at edge is crazy good. Corner is like Devon Witherspoon. If you look at him, I think the Jair Alexander comp is perfect. Like the motor, his ability to tackle, his ability to isolate on an island.
Play inside and out,
To play inside and out. Christian Gonzalez, you won't get that inside ability, but the Eagles need a true long, lengthy cornerback that can come in, and you're not just drafting him to be a Danny Watkins where you drafted a guard to draft a guard because you needed a guard. No, you're drafting a corner that is good enough and talked about in NFL circles very highly. And if you turn on the tape, like we had said, both of those guys can compete. I saw Christian Gonzalez live this year against Colorado. I know the level of competition wasn't great, but he just moved so much better than everybody else on the field. And you just look, when you're scouting, is there one guy that pops out and is like, yep, there's Christian Gonzalez, 2 interceptions, almost takes one to the house. He clearly is a true shutdown corner, and you are matching need with want, with what actually the board is. And I love where the Eagles are sitting right now. I didn't think it would be this way going back to last year. What if we were in the conversation to pick one of these quarterbacks and you're sitting at 10? Things might have got a little uglier, but now it's almost a luxury to where you sit back and say, like the Eagles always do, we are truly going to draft the best player available, whoever's highest on our board at whatever position. And Lou, could you argue with him? I mean, outside of wide receiver, I mean, you're filling in a need. You're filling in a need wherever you draft somebody.
Exactly. And I think you look at it, they're in a position where they can really take any route, and I think they can make out pretty well. They can sit there at 10 and take one of those prospects. They want to go corner early and take an alignment with those second 2 picks. If they want to go line early, there's enough cornerback depth later on where you can wait. If you want to trade down, there are a lot of teams that are going to be quarterback needy. You can collect a future pick and still have multiple selections. I think they're in a perfect spot where they don't have to really force anything, but at the same time, for the needs they do have, both in the short term and long term, there are a lot of really good prospects. And we've mentioned a bunch, and we'll continue to cover those guys throughout the offseason. And even a guy we didn't even mention when it comes to the edge spot, I really like Nolan Smith, who's actually getting some Hassan Reddick comparisons. So there are definitely some options, man. It's going to be fun to watch the combine next week. It's a lot more fun when you know, you don't have a ton of draft picks this year, but when you have 3 in the first 2 rounds, that's an exciting opportunity for sure. We mentioned quarterback. I want to get into that a little bit more. I feel like Jalen Hurts has a big impact on this combine process. in this quarterback class we'll get into coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's episode of Locked On Eagles is sponsored by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard us talk about this mobile game app, and we can't tell you how much fun we had in 2022 competing against our fellow Locked On hosts. Now it's your turn to compete. More on that later. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. You'll manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through seasons, and lead your team to glory, trying to build a dynasty. With Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, and all the ups and downs of a season, all in this challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want to and when you want to. Locked On Eagles listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps, LOCKEDON. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles. We got some combine and draft talk overall, Gino, some top prospects we're going to be watching in Indianapolis next week. I think the theme for the Eagles is going to be line help on offensive and defensive fronts and cornerback. Those are going to be the three spots I think we're watching heavily because there's not a lot of other needs the Eagles have that they don't already have replacements for or free agents they're going to re-sign. And when you look at some of the other positions, they're not as strong, right? I mean, you don't need a receiver, but receiver is not nearly as good this year. They got to be disciplined when it comes to running back, I think. And you don't need a quarterback this year, which is huge. And we thought maybe they would with those 2 first-round picks, Gino. And that's the big thing is Jalen Hurts, having Hurts really takes the pressure off. And as we mentioned earlier in the show, I think a lot of teams now are going to, I think, throw everything out I think they knew about quarterback, right? Or put more emphasis on certain things. And I think patience is going to be definitely enhanced. With Jalen Hurts, you saw Philadelphia reap those rewards. I think, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, regardless of if you like those guys or not, I think teams are going to see the traits and they're going to say, we're willing to be more patient because it's working out for a lot of these teams.
I think you have to, because if you look at the last couple years and you talk about 2018, for example, how good that class was supposed to be, right? And it turned out it was okay. 2020, that class, that turned out to be pretty good. We knew that class was going to be good coming out, and it turned out to be. And look at these guys.
It was just good in a way that people didn't predict, because it was Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson that were great. It was Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert. Most people said it was going to be Baker and Darnold and Tua and Jordan Love.
And that's why you have to throw out everything you know about quarterback and truly just figure out what is going to work for you. What did somebody say the other day?
A scout said that it's like a lottery at this point, and you got to just take the guy that has the highest prize.
You have to, and the thing is with quarterbacks, so much has to go into the alignment of the ideals of your offensive coordinator, what they want to do in terms of philosophy and scheme, what he did in college. Like, just go and watch the tape on some of these guys where they just a 1 or 2 read quarterback. A lot of those 1 and 2 read guys don't turn out when the lights are on the brightest. You look at like DJ Uiagalelei. He was supposed to be the guy, and he ends up having to transfer. He's at Oregon State. Now he was talked about as the number 1 guy coming into this class. And it truly is a crapshoot. And that's why you're talking about Anthony Richardson, who, if I had to say what would scouts like more, Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, I think it's Anthony Richardson 100 times out of 100.
I agree. Yeah.
And I could see why a team is willing to take a top 10 selection on him, because you've seen the Pat Mahomes, the Jalen Hurts of the world, where it's like, yeah, maybe traits and maybe the greatest tape in the world isn't everything, but leadership and what they have between the ears and just unbelievable tools. I mean, Anthony Richardson, you're talking about arm strength and athleticism. That's like arm strength that is way more powerful than Jalen Hurts. The same type of running ability as Jalen Hurts. I could see why a team falls in love with that, because when you walk into a meeting room and you see this imposing guy whose legs look like tree trunks, and if he interviews great, Lou, I'm not going to be shocked that a team takes him in the top 10. And I could see Ford truly going this year in the top 10.
And again, when you have that philosophy, a lot of times you're going to miss. You're going to miss on a Zach Wilson type. You're going to miss on a Paxton Lynch or a Trey Lance, but I would much rather be that team with that philosophy, because I'm the team then that's going to take Lamar Jackson. I'm the team that's going to take Josh Allen. I'm the team that's going to take Justin Herbert and not Tua. I'm the team that's going to take Patrick Mahomes in 2017. You got to remember with Patrick Mahomes, like, and all these guys I'm mentioning, yes, they're first round picks, they're top 15, top 5, top 10 selections, but they all had question marks and all of them had doubts for sure. I think those are the players, the NFL. I mean, you saw the reports over the last few days that scouts are now saying you just got to take the guy with the highest prize, because some of the safest bets, Gino, at quarterback don't end up being safe bets at all. And even if it is a safe bet, that's not enough in the NFL anymore. You want star power. You want guys that can do it all. And so I get why somebody would talk themselves into an Anthony Richardson over a CJ Stroud. And Jalen Hurts wasn't a player like these guys coming out that had unworldly, off the charts physical traits, but he also lines up perfectly with that. Number one, he's got the mobility you need in the NFL now, but he's got that whole unknown factor that these guys are talking about at quarterback. Like, if Jalen Hurts can take that step in year 3 as a starter, as a second round pick, then who knows what could happen. I mean, the Eagles are a great example of that. They had a quarterback in Carson Wentz they invested more in than any team has invested in one single player over the last decade. And the 2 guys that got him to the Super Bowl were his 2 backups. I mean, so the Eagles are a perfect example of quarterback just being a who the hell knows. That doesn't mean anything can work. There are certain traits you need in a quarterback and you should look for, but they are a great representation of it really still is unpredictable at the most important spot.
I mean, I will always go back to Josh Rosen. I loved Josh Rosen coming out of college. Boy, would I go back and tell myself I was the dumbest individual on the planet and how stupid I look not betting on the traits of Josh Allen. I hated the Josh Allen pick. I didn't think he looked good at all. But Lou knows that I've taken more slack from people in Buffalo about that Josh Allen pick. Yeah. But I'm not an idiot. I'll go back and not revisionist history, but change my paradigm on how I look at prospects. And Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes. If you don't learn from that, you're simply an insane person, to where you're trying to invest in these guys that you believe are safe bets. And what is a safe bet in the NFL now?
There really isn't.
There is not. You have to try and invest in, like you said, if you're going into a claw machine, right? Like, you're not trying to get that one prize. Like, you have to look for everything. You have to scour all of the quarterbacks and figure out, maybe it's that little toy that has a little nick out of one of its ears that might be the best option for you. And you have to look at this whole pool. Take away what you looked at in the past, like the Bryce Young talk that he's too small. I don't care. Like, look at his tape. He looks phenomenal.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson, you haven't seen somebody come from that Florida type of offense where quarterbacks just go to die, it seems.
You just got to be open-minded, Gino.
You have to.
You know what I mean?
You have to be open-minded. And you can't just expect to see the same, I would say, at quarterback.
Right.
Quarterback is so evolved. And when I talk about evolved, it's evolving at a level that is just, it's like AI to an extent, where AI is evolving faster than we can keep up with. Quarterback, it's evolving faster than we learn. Like, we're trying to figure out who is the next Jalen Hurts while we learned that Jalen Hurts was the guy. Like, we have to go back now and change all of our data points to include guys like this. And that should just say, nobody has any idea about freaking anything at quarterback, and we're lucky that we got Jalen Hurts to land as well as he did.
Yeah, and again, you can look for certain things. You look for arm talent, you look for mobility, you look for the IQ in between the eyes, you look at the head. That's going to be very important. But like you're mentioning, I mean, quarterback, it's really hard to predict who's going to pan out. There's so many moving pieces, and that's why you just got to, like I said, keep an open mind. You can't say just because a player didn't do this in college doesn't mean he can't do it. Because if he has the traits that say we can develop him into that player, it's why I would totally understand why you take an Anthony Richardson, why you would take a Will Levis. That entire top 4, I don't know who's going to go where, Gino, and it's going to be fascinating, but I would get it for all 4 guys, and they're all different in styles and with their traits and what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and it's it's definitely the Wild West of this position. And like you mentioned, I don't know how it happened, but I'm just glad Jalen Hurts became that guy, so we don't have to have the Anthony Richardson debate and Will Levis, and because that's what we thought we were going to have to do this year. And they had a top 10 pick. So the fact that the Eagles, they don't have a hat in that ring is it's definitely a great feeling. But The Combine's coming up Monday throughout the week. We've got draft coverage for you right here on Locked On Eagles. Subscribe to the podcast on all platforms for a show Monday through Friday on YouTube as well. And we're always talking birds on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase LOE, and at GC24_football. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. For my co-host Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.